Hello, my name is Simon. Welcome to Why Is That, a free speech platform where we explore big ideas and the controversies of our time. Hello, beloveds, and welcome back to another episode of Why Is That? Today in the studio, we've got Danny Duchamp.
Hello.
Which you can find at his YouTube channel.
youtube.com/Danny Duchamp, DANNYDUCHAMP.
And today we're also joined by phone by Brendan Malone, a long-time spokesman and public speaker who's also just started up his own YouTube channel, which is called what?
Left Foot Media.
Check out Left Foot Media, especially if you like this conversation.
Yeah, indeed, do that.
Now, it feels like today in society we're becoming more divided, more into tribalism and identity politics. Why is that?
Well, the why is that at this point seems to just be that it seems a lot easier to identify yourself as part of some kind of a group and defend yourself on that basis than to stand up as an individual, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, I think really what a lot of it boils down to is that, well, my personal theory here is that I think we've lost sight of the importance of human dignity. And so we now tend to look for other ways, as you suggest perhaps, to try and identify ourselves. And to try and define our existence, to try and define our value and our worth. And it's just so much easier, I think, to go along with, I guess, the group that appeals to you or that seems to accept you, and stick with that group come hell or high water.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the term tribalism, I'm sure the lovely folks at home will know exactly what that is, but identity politics is probably one that's a little bit more foreign. So basically, at its core, it's the idea that someone should be considered not on the basis of their individual merits, but as part of some identity that they have affiliation with. It can be their gender, male, female, or other thing that was invented on Tumblr, and it can be their race, their sexuality, any of these sorts of things, and it makes their interactions more about how those sorts of identities play against one another rather than how individuals do.
And they're also very broad. Are people in a category you go, oh, well, you say that because you're white. And it's like, well, white people have a whole lot of identity too, left-wing and right-wing and, various different beliefs and nationalities and cultures, etc. Generally, identity politics and tribalism, I find, is too narrow and individuals, as Danny was talking about. There's just so much variety.
Yeah, so Brendan, how did you get interested in these sorts of topics?
I guess I've always had an interest. Look, I could tell a funny story. Actually, I was speaking at Auckland University some years ago, and there was a young female student who approached me, and this would have been about probably 8 or 9 years ago. And the way the conversation turned, she all of a sudden said to me out of the blue, it was related to the topic we're talking about, but she said, the only reason you're a man is because you think you're a man and your friends treat you like a man.
Right.
And I said, what? I was really quite astounded by this. I said, what do you mean? And she says, well, if you believed that you were a woman and your friends treated you like a woman, then you would be a woman. And I said, you truly believe that? She said, yeah, I do. And so that sort of started this discussion. So I started asking her questions because I said, I can sort of see some logical flaws here that I think are worth exploring. And so I literally said to her, I said, well, what if I believe that I am a chicken? And she said to me, what do you mean? I said, well, from a young age I knew I was different. I was attracted to roosters in school. I always loved the birdie dance at school disco. And when I have a dinner party, my friends turn my food into pellets and throw it on the floor, and I sort of peck around and eat it up. And so, I think I'm a chicken. My friends treat me as a chicken. Am I a chicken? And I was waiting for at this point to say, no, don't be so stupid. You've taken it too far. And so we could have a discussion about the logic of her position.
Of course, that's what you expect.
Yeah, that's right. That's how rational discourse happens. And she said to me, she turned around and she said, without missing a beat, straight face, she said, well, I suppose you'd be a chicken then. And I was taken aback. I was stunned at this point. And I actually then started to ask her, well, what if I believe I don't exist? and my friends, they all ignore me because, of course, I don't exist. If I punched you now or stole your handbag, then I wouldn't be guilty of anything because I don't exist, right? Unfortunately, you had to take off before you finished the conversation. But the point was, that story, I used to tell that anecdote everywhere I went, and people, regardless of what their personal affiliations or philosophies or beliefs were, the vast majority of them laughed at that story.
Yeah, you'd expect so.
Well, yeah, because it's crazy, right? But the scary thing is that story is actually now an ideological belief because of identity politics that is given mainstream credence now, which is really quite astounding. You think, 8 years ago it was a joke. Now people buy into this as some sort of serious ideological commitment, and that's quite astounding to me.
Well, in Germany they had that case of the girl that identified as a cat.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, there was and apparently that does actually mean she's a cat, and you're a bigot if you don't treat her like one. Remember that.
Well, this is to me, it's interesting, this bigger question of who gets to define reality. Now, there's certain things about our existence that are subjective, and obviously we have total control over. What's your favourite flavour of ice cream? What's the best ice cream flavour in the world? That's a highly subjective question. But then when you start wanting to treat reality itself in the same way that you would treat that question, what's the best ice cream flavour, then I think we're in a bit of trouble, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually all of these things, on some level, these I identify as statements, they really seem to me to be a bit of a word game in a lot of ways. If someone says, for example, I'm neither a man nor a woman, then that's a nonsensical statement if you're using the definitions of the words that we'd usually use. A man is someone with an X and a Y chromosome, and a bunch of other different traits associated with being male. Female is someone with two X's. Now, if someone says, I am neither a male or female, that would seem, so you have some kind of genetic disorder. No, I just don't identify that way. Well, at that point, they're using some other definition of the word. They don't mean the word that we usually use. So it just seems like being intentionally misleading on some level.
Well, I think, too, the interesting question for me is the whole thing of a lot of this tends to go hand in hand with this view that so much about identity is, some sort of subjective social construct. And therefore it doesn't matter, so the theory goes, you can just make your own identity up, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's just a social construct, then why can't I make up my own social construct? But then that sort of starts to raise the question, well then why does it even matter that you have a social construct? If they're that meaningless that you can change them at will, why do you need identity politics and why buy into identity politics? Isn't that sort of an irony in itself?
Yeah.
You created identity something and elevated it to this level, despite the fact that you're claiming that identity doesn't really mean much more than a subjective social construct?
Well, it's been talked about a lot, trying to remove words from children's at school. It's like, you can't use gay or anything like that, to try to remove homophobia, because a lot of people who believe language constructs reality, and there's a lot of theorists who go on about that, and it's like, well, what does this have to do with anything? When I was going through Teachers College, all those theorists were the ones being pushed.
Yeah.
I think there's an interesting question here about transgenderism. So, I actually don't know of either of you guys. What is your position on the transgender thing? If I start taking some hormones and put on a dress and get some breast implants, am I a woman?
I don't think you are. My personal belief is that I think transgenderism, transformerism. I think I'm Optimus Prime.
Yes.
No, I think transgenderism, I think, is a form of identity dysphoria, and it is it's obviously clearly something psychologically is not connecting with the biological reality that a person lives.
Right.
And so I think just like we would treat other dysphorias with care and I think proper loving therapy, I think the same would be true of people who have gender identity confusion.
Okay.
That's my take on it. Just like, for example, why do we say to someone who says, well, I believe I was born into the wrong body, I'm actually a woman, even though they were born male. Why do we celebrate that, yet at the same time someone says, well, I believe I was born into the wrong body, I need to be really, really thin, I'm too fat, and we don't celebrate that, we call that anorexia and we try and treat it. Why or if someone turns up and says, because there is actually a real thing, species dysphoria, people believe that they are actually different species.
Sure.
And why do we not celebrate that? To me, it's such a logical inconsistency there.
As Simon pointed out just a bit before, we are starting to celebrate that, so don't you worry. It's coming.
Hold your horses, Brendan. It's coming. A new line of cards. Someone's going to go into greeting cards and make a lot of money out of this.
Well, someone's going to identify as a greeting card. Yeah, probably.
Well, the thing is that there's that really interesting phenomenon too very tragic as well, of those various body dysphorias that people experience, those who believe they were born with limbs that they shouldn't have, and they try and get amputations, to remove an arm or a leg because they believe, that that this is a false version of who they truly are. And it really does raise that whole question of why then would you try and discourage someone from doing that? If you're saying to someone else, well, your body is irrelevant and it's all just what you feel.
Like you had that woman who believed she should be blind, so her therapist was help pour drain cleaner into her eyes to blind her.
Yeah.
Horrific.
That's I don't understand. I assume that person lost their license, yes?
I don't know. That made the headlines, but,
Well, I'm going to look that up. Hopefully it doesn't shatter my faith in humanity. Anyway, on the transgender issue, I think I take a position that I'm totally happy with calling a transgender person, like a male to female transgender person, their preferred pronouns and all those sorts of things. But I think it's for reasons that they would probably find unsatisfactory. Because essentially what I see it as is someone is born in one gender and then notices that our society has roles that are expected and in some cases required of you based on your gender, and they just feel that they can't really fulfill one of them but would feel much more comfortable in the other. And so if it's that important to them and they want to try to fulfill the one that they weren't born into, then sure, I'm culturally libertarian. There's a buzzword for you. I'm totally happy referring to them by their preferred pronouns, etc. But I don't think that they are therefore a woman or a man in the other direction.
Well,
and I understand that. To me, that's a very principled approach. I know a lot of people I know are like that. And I think the issue really starts to crop up when people want to take it that next step further and say, well, now you must embrace the ideological belief along with the pronoun,
Yeah.
But when we go into social, everything's a social construct. I mean, reality comes in to some point. I mean, the qualification is always that person is a trans woman or a trans man. I remember when I was studying anthropology at university, I realised I just massacred the word, but we're studying cultures. It's where a woman that goes through menopause can all of a sudden become a man and get married, but doesn't have to take part in the hunt, and can invite a young man over to impregnate his bride, yes. Because doesn't have the necessary organs.
So always felt in her heart.
Happy affair.
Yes, always sounded like always thought she was a man, and that man was a cuck.
It's unbelievable, and it just sounds so appealing, doesn't it? It's like, oh yeah, give me that. It sounds like the best version of human intimacy that we can experience. Go with that, then. It just doesn't ever sound that appealing. It sounds so sort of robotic and functionalist and manufactured.
Okay.
I think for me the interesting thing too is the way now they're trying to. You see this ideological imposition on children and young people, and this whole push for. So you have a young boy who starts saying, I want to play with dolls and I want to wear pink. And so we see this sort of tendency now to try and say, well, this must mean that, this young boy is actually a female trapped in a male body.
Yes.
And let's give him hormone blockers and we'll stop puberty and all the rest of it. And to me, it's astounding, especially when you look at the research. I read some research recently suggesting that between 88 to 98% of those young boys, once puberty hits, they will then go on to live the rest of their lives quite happily identifying as males.
Yeah.
And that's astounding that we are now pushing this idea that we should be doing the exact opposite to what, biologically seems to just happen naturally anyway.
Absolutely.
Okay, to move the conversation to a less controversial topic, politics.
Yeah, that'll cure it of controversy. Well done.
Hold on, can we do religion first?
Yeah. So with the do you actually want to switch topic, or can we go on?
Oh, well, okay, whatever.
Okay.
Libertarianism.
Well, I mean,
feels good.
Yeah, that is essentially, I suppose, where it sort of goes to some extent. The other side of identity politics isn't just, identifying as one thing or another and deciding you can identify as some physically different thing than you are. It's also the idea that you can claim some kind of benefits or claim some kind of history as an individual because of the group you're part of. For example, you'll often hear the reparations idea that you see in a lot of countries, where there's some group that historically had some negative effects visited upon them, and then their descendants saying, well, we now deserve things because we're the same race, or something like that. This idea that you can be part of some identity, and therefore you share in everything that everyone else of that identity shares in.
Well, I think it's interesting too, in the sense that this is always one of the things that's intrigued me about identity politics. If you look at a lot of it, it just seems to me that often it really does reek of Marxism, a lot of it. And what you often get, it seems, is they just take Marxism and substitute the word class for the word gender or race or whatever it is, and then they create an oppressor class and an oppressed class. And normally people who buy into identity politics put themselves in the oppressed class. And then it really does often become about a grievance sort of cycle,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot that's been said about how victimhood is a form of currency at the moment. It's useful to be considered to be disadvantaged in some way, because you can use it to say, well, I've been disadvantaged, therefore now I must be advantaged.
Yeah, I think it's true. It's interesting in the sense too that when you think about that, how this is one of the things where it becomes so destructive, I think, to human flourishing. Because one of the worst things for you, and we know this now too from a lot of the neuroscience research, that one of the fundamental things about changing your status in life, if you're in a place that's very destructive or it's unhealthy and you want to move to a place that's better for you and you want to really flourish, the first place that really starts, they tell us now, is in the mind, and how you view yourself and how you think of your circumstance. And so it's sort of it's almost this counterintuitive thing where on the one hand they're saying, yeah, we don't want to be the victim class, but we want to keep thinking of ourselves that way. And when you keep thinking of yourself that way, it actually has a tendency to keep you in that sort of that class,
I think the big thing about identity politics as well, and its relationship to equality, where in the West, strive to have equality based on universal ethics. But when a lot of people are saying, I'm oppressed because they want to be brought up and to be given stuff to be brought up, and other groups are being pointed at and going, you have privilege, and if you've got something I don't have, we're not equal, so therefore you should not have it.
And that's exactly what you were talking about there, Brendan. That was, if you replace whatever group was alluded to there with the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, you have Marxism.
Right. That's exactly it. Yeah. And that's the scary bit about it. It really is. It's Marxism by another name, often. Yeah. And that's the thing to me, that I really hate that term privilege. I like it. It drives me batty, and especially now. It's sort of, I don't know if you remember this, but a couple of years ago, when people were throwing around the term politically correct, and often they were misusing it, and people would rightly say, oh, you're just using that as a cover-all, you're not really being logical, you're just sort of throwing around this slogan word. Well, I think privilege has become the exact same thing now. you know?
Yeah.
People use it now all the time for everything, and they don't even really define or even probably know what they even mean when they say the word anymore.
Do you remember when privilege was a good thing and being a victim was a bad thing?
Yes, yeah. You used to say that, I've passed my driving test, I now have the privilege to drive a car. It's like something you earned. Now it's specifically something you didn't earn.
Why? Isn't that a universal human right now?
Yes, I know.
Well, and I love it how often, once upon a time we used to have, and this is where ethics, and particularly Western ethics, is so fundamental, we used to account for the reality, the truth of the fact that if you were doing something to someone, there had to be intent and there had to be an actual action that you were carrying out. So if you were oppressing someone, you had to have intent to be an oppressor, and you had to actually be oppressing that person. But now, because of the whole concept of privilege, people are saying, well, it's not your fault, you don't even know you're oppressing someone, and, you just are because of your existence. It's absolutely astounding.
It is amazing. I mean, the idea that you can ascribe some kind of blame to someone because of just some unchangeable nature of their themselves, something that they didn't choose. Well, we used to call that prejudice.
That's right.
Now we call it progressivism? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a brave new world.
And it's a recipe for continuous conflict. I mean, we all want peace in society. We want everyone to be happy, etc. And I just don't think this is a recipe for it. It's showing to be not a recipe for it.
Free question. Do some people really want that peace, or is there such an inner turmoil within themselves that they sort of want that inner turmoil effectively writ large? They sort of want it. They externalise what their own inner turmoil is, you know what I mean, and want to live in that sort of world of I'm being oppressed, someone's against me. Like you say, victim status is such a powerful currency now.
Yeah. It is difficult as well, I think, once you're in that mode of thinking to get out of it, because it's I guess it's addictive. If you have this victimhood and you see it getting all of these advantages for you, it would be quite hard to want to break out of that way of thinking.
Well, I think too, especially in a culture where, and rightly so, because I think actually from the beginning of time, I think that human existence has really been about struggle of some kind. And I think that's how we truly find ourselves, and the way you become heroic, whether it's your personal life and developing heroic virtue, or whether it's overcoming some adversity, or perhaps you're in your personal character, whatever it might be. The way you do it is because there is a struggle that exists, and life is about that struggle and participating in that struggle. But I think that often what happens is that the whole, I don't know, the victim mentality, what it tends to do is people want the heroic stuff without the actual struggle. They want to be able to call themselves an activist and a hero, but they don't really want to have to do the hard yards and put in the work, really, that's required to truly live those things out. So it's easy just to say, well, I'm a victim and I'm overcoming some oppression and therefore I'm an activist. But just because of the coffee I buy or the clothes I wear or my ethnicity or whatever it is,
But they keep going, I'm a victim, I've got, society is forcing this on me, etc. I have no agency. Yeah. And you can't struggle if you don't have any agency, and if you're not an individual, putting in the hard yards to overcome. Because even the most people born into fantastic wealth have struggles in that they've got to deal with.
Yeah, I suppose that is if the listeners at home have any takeaway, I'd probably like it to be what you're touching on there, that any kind of heroism, any kind of the positive traits that people want to think of themselves, the way you be something like that is by doing something that warrants that, rather than simply by identifying as something. That's a way of feeling like you've done something without doing anything.
Yeah, that's right. And it's very easy to fall into that mindset. And look, I grew up in a home that was really, it was a welfare home at times. My father got invalided off the job that he had because of a very serious illness. And so there were times when we were going out, well, we really struggled. I mean, there were times when we didn't know where the next meal was coming from. And I remember how very easily you can sort of get into this mentality of thinking that everything's happening to you, and it's something I've fought hard. And it's only really in recent years, I think, started to really overcome this and realise that in actual fact there is a lot in our life that we do have control over and are responsible for ourselves. But it's very easy to start thinking that everything's happening to me, that I'm being oppressed, that, you know, life's against me, that people are against me. And you get stuck in that way of thinking, and then, you know, you sort of start to think that, well, you know, the world should be changed to suit my needs or to make it better for me, rather than actually having to, you know, do anything or commit yourself to any work of any kind to try and better your situation, you know.
I think it's funny using the case study of Ireland, where they were actually oppressed, and, you know, sort of like, oh, you know, and they knew they were oppressed, but they were like, oh, well, we have to suck it up, we have to, you know, work and, you know, do jobs and grow character.
Right.
Rather than just like, please give us reparations. If you believe that the society is institutionally biased against you, why are you going to the government who represents that, you know, for reparation or, you know?
Well, I think there's times when I think there are clear grievances where, you know, a state, for example, has to make some sort of reparation. You know, I think if you've got, like, for example, if someone did have land that's stolen off them, you know, I think there's clear case for reparation there.
Yeah.
But then it seems to me that now so much of this is, and you see a lot of this now with some of the sort of Black Lives Matter protests and stuff. People just randomly saying, well, I want money. What for? Well, because I'm entitled to it, because I'm oppressed.
Yeah, it's starting to get into that vague territory. I think, to me, the cutoff really is when it's the individuals in question, because it's what it's about to me, is individuals as opposed to the identity. I don't care about the identity, I care about the individual.
That's right.
So, for example, in America, you know, I don't think that they should be giving any money to Black Lives Matter just because they feel oppressed. I do understand the reparations that they gave to the Japanese internment camps that happened during the war. So the actual people who were taken away from their homes and who were actually put in these camps, which was, you know, a terrible thing for their government to do, they were given reparations. But those are those actual individuals who actually were individually wronged by their government. That's when it makes sense to me.
That's right.
Okay, Brendan, we've got 2 minutes left. Do you have any final words?
Oh, look, I would say embrace your dignity and don't buy into identity politics, you know. If you want to live a meaningful life and you want to really contribute something and really find flourishing, then you've really got to stop looking for victim status and getting stuck in it. You've really got to start giving of yourself in some way. And that only really happens when you stop seeing yourself as being constantly oppressed and the whole world as being against you, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Danny?
Well, I don't know how I can follow that out. That pretty much sums up what I wanted to talk about.
I think also a big part of building character and, you know, finding your strength is becoming disciplined. I don't think that's probably a topic for another time, but you're not going to do any of that without discipline.
Yeah, good call.
And as we said before, dear listeners, we love you. We want you to be happy and to live in peace and to grow and be fantastic human beings.
Yeah. So before we go, we'll just do some shilling again. I hope you're all okay with that. So
we are particularly shameless.
We are, yeah. But we're shilling for ourselves as individuals.
True libertarianism.
Yes. I'm Danny Duchamp. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/Danny Duchamp, DANNYDUCHAMP. And we've got Brendan from Left Foot Media. What's your URL?
You can catch me at Watch LFM. That's Watch Left Foot Media. So watchlfm.com.
Great, cool. And you can also get this some episodes of this show online on YouTube at...
Why is that? Funny that.
That's
why. Okay. Tune in next week. We've got some big things coming. Which... Right next week. Join me, Simon, and guests, 104.6 FM at 3:15 on Tuesdays for my show, Why Is That? Or anytime online at planetaudio.org.nz/Why Is That? You can also type in Why Is That into YouTube, and it's hosted on the channel Dialectic already.